Hello, everyone. I'm Ellie from Nourishment Redacted, and welcome to Lioness Lifestyle Live. Our show loves to interview different meat-based women and showcase their healing story through keto or a carnivore diet. We all come from different backgrounds and ages and even different healing journeys, but we come together under the powerful healing of a meat-based diet. I'm just introduced myself. I'm a wife and a mother of two young ones. I've been previously keto and now I'm carnivore for a year and a half. I used to be 240 pounds. I lost 70 pounds and I used to suffer from deep, dark depression, panic attacks, and now I'm medication free and so happy to be alive with purpose.
Hi, everyone. I am Cristie and my channel is Meeting Wellness. It's very, very great to meet with you all this evening. And I am a teacher from Southern California. I am also a wife and a mother of two teenage boys. I have been carnivore for a little over a year now. And in that time, I have seen a great reduction in my anxiety, my joint pain, and my disordered eating patterns are gone. And also just an incredible increase in my energy.
And hello, my name is Adrian. I'm BiggestLoserCarnivore. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm a stay-at-home mom of four who struggled with obesity and autoimmunity my entire life. And I've been upwards of 330 pounds. And I've tried everything from lots of running and restricting to being on national TV to gastric bypass, and nothing was consistent until I found the carnivore diet. And I've been doing this about almost 2 years.
So what we like to do every single week is shout out a comment from the previous week's show. And so it is time for us to do that now. And we call this the Roar of the Week. So this one comes from TSM Selly. Great info and nice to hear how much in common many of us have. So true. Thank you. I went keto and was addicted to the keto snacks. Me too, you guys, that are seriously trash food. Once I gave that up, and boy, was it hard, everything just fell into place. Now, strict carnivore. Thank you so much. We're so glad you enjoyed last week's show. Leave a comment below after this show, and we just might shout you out as next week's Roar of the Week.
Now let's give a big welcome to Dr. Anthony Chaffee. He's a medical doctor and a neurosurgeon who advocates for the carnivore diet, promoting that this is the ideal way for humans to thrive. He's famous for the phrase, "plants are trying to kill you," and his expertise is from human nutrition, as a doctor, and as an athlete. We are so happy to welcome Dr. Anthony Chaffee to Lioness Lifestyle Live.
Hello.
Hi, Dr. Chaffee. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on and meet with us this evening. And we have some questions for you tonight. Are you ready for that?
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Absolutely. Okay, so our first question comes from someone who's watches our show regularly, and they actually asked us to ask ahead of time. And I picked this one out because as a woman, I'm constantly watching other women eat a bunch of salad. And they think that it's healthy. And so this question comes from Darth Carnivore, and they are asking, what is your take on how vegetables achieved its near sacred cow status in nutrition as a superfood group? My inner 80s child is finally at peace being plant-free.
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember this happening as a kid. When fat was vilified, everything else automatically became good for you. As long as it didn't have fat, it was therefore good for you. I walked down candy aisles as a kid, and it said sugar-free, and I was a kid. It was like, it's candy. Like, who cares if it's sugar or sorry, fat-free? It's fat-free. It's fat-free candy. I'm like, come on. And so, it was just a marketing pitch. And so it's just anything without fat automatically became good for you. And so vegetables didn't have any fats, so it was like automatically good for you. And they had a lot of fiber, which was indigestible. They didn't have many calories. So like, oh, this isn't going to how you lose weight because it's all about calories, calories, calories. Well, of course it isn't. And so when people went to that sort of low calorie, low fat approach, things did get worse, but that was the argument, was that if it didn't have calories and it didn't have fat, it was therefore good for you. And then they started tying into other sorts of selling points, because now it started becoming a big market, right? And so they said, well, now there's nutrient density, and now they have these vitamins, minerals per calorie. It has much more nutrient density per calorie. Well, that's not really. What about per leaf? What about per ounce? What about per gram? Because that nutrient calorie is very, very poor, and the bioavailability is poor as well. So it was really just marketing. Anything that didn't have fat in it was automatically good for you. And then they just came up with these other little selling points to just keep pushing it from a market perspective.
Right. Our next question is, okay. Switching to a carnivore diet, I noticed that my veins, particularly in my hands and my arms, have become much more visible. Can you explain what might be happening? And I want to add to this that I have had a lot more veins in my legs.
Well, it's generally when you become more vascular, it means that one of two, well, it can mean two things. That you're getting more lean, so that the vasculature is more apparent and it's more visible. And also, if the veins are actually growing themselves, then the muscles underneath are getting more healthy also. So this typically happens when people are exercising. They're getting more muscle development, so the muscles are getting stronger. They need more blood supply coming in, so that means more blood has to come out as well. And then you're getting your body fat percentage down, so it's actually much more visible. So all those veins are there for people. They may not be as engorged because you may not be pumping as much blood into the muscle, but they are there, and they may not be visible because they're just sort of covered over. So that's a good sign. So if your veins in your hands and your arms are becoming more visible, it means you're getting in better shape and you're getting leaner.
Yeah, that question really had me scratching my head. And so I'm so glad you explained that so well. Thank you. I wanted to just invite everybody to please like the video. And if you're enjoying the show so far, please subscribe to our new consolidated channel, which is at Lioness Lifestyle, and obviously support Dr. Chaffee. We were so thankful to have on here. Another question from our viewer, which is something that I think we're all very passionate about because we're all mothers. So what foods would you absolutely avoid for kids, and why? And what are some good swaps maybe while they're doing that transition from like a standard American diet closer to a carnivore diet?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, the main things are, get rid of the processed foods and the sugars and things like that, artificial ingredients. People again get so hung up on calories, and well, if it doesn't have calories, then it's okay. Calories are fine. If they're the right calories, it's energy for life. That's not a bad thing. You need the right calories, you need the right nutrients, you need the right things in your body. And so just because something doesn't have calories does not mean that it's completely neutral. We are not combustion engines. We're not just burning our fuel like a steam locomotive. We're chemical factories, and we derive chemical energy and nutrition from the different chemicals that we ingest, put in our bodies. And these artificial ingredients are chemicals, and they have different chemical reactions in our body, many of which we don't understand well enough. We have patented over 1 million novel chemicals that have never existed in nature since the 1970s. What the hell do you think those things do to your body? And we're just going to randomly put them in our body. The majority of those are in the food industry, the beauty industry, so makeup and sprays and things like that, and cleaning supplies. So these are things that we have regular contact with or intentionally put on or in our body, and we have no idea what these chemicals do. People come out and say, "Oh, this is the new sweetener, the new this, the new that." That's exactly what I want to avoid. I want the old thing. I want the thing that's been around for 50,000 years, and we know what it does. Something that's withstood the test of time, not something that just showed up last week, and 50 years from now we're going to find out that it caused some weird form of super cancer. That's exactly what I want to avoid. So avoid things like that. Eat real food, whole foods. Even if you're going to eat vegetables and fruits and these sorts of things, eat things that actually exist in nature. So that's the first thing. Get rid of all the fake foods, anything that's in a box, anything that was created by humans in the last century has no business going in your body. And then after that, cutting out certain select things. I think that grains, sugar in particular, obviously refined sugar, things that are very sweet in general, aren't going to be as good for you. And you can look at Dr. David Unwin, Unwin. He has on his website and on the Public Health Collaboration, the PHC website, phc.org. They have a list of all these different sorts of foods that we think are, well, that's very normal, like a banana, and how many teaspoons of sugar that relates to. I think like a banana, the average banana is like 9 teaspoons of sugar in it. And it's just like, well, I didn't know that. It's a lot. There's a lot of sugar in there. So you look at these sugar equivalents. It was funny. A friend of mine, Alex McDonald, the way that he sort of gets these athletes, there's a lot of top athletes that are going ketogenic carnivore, and one of the ways that he like a big selling point for some of them is relating it to alcohol, and he said it's just like you can have that baked potato or you can have 36 beers. Which one do you want? And they're like, what? Because it's like the same amount of carbs like in each one, and they're like, Jesus, so they're like, yeah, screw the potato, and if I'm going to do this, I'm doing the beers, obviously, a particular kind of beer. I don't, obviously all of them have different amounts of carbs and things like that. But, you just put these things in relation. So, I think for kids in particular, it's a really, really good idea to look at ketogenic diets in general, a lot of fatty meats and things like that, because this is so important for their brain and their neuronal development and neurological development. Your brain is predominantly made out of fat and cholesterol. That's the vast majority of the structures of your brain are made out of fat and cholesterol. Your brain primarily runs on ketones. People say, well, we have to have glucose. You need to eat all this glucose. Well, first of all, you don't need to eat glucose. You never need to eat glucose because you make glucose. And you make all the glucose that you need for your body and your brain. And so there are parts of your brain that do still like to run on glucose, even when you have ketones available. But the vast majority of your brain, including the neocortex, where we do our thinking, primarily and preferentially runs on ketones. And so if you have enough ketones, even if you have an abundance of glucose, those parts of your brain, the majority of your brain will only run on ketones. It's only until those ketones start coming down that you start filling in the gaps with glucose. So it's a secondary backup energy source that obviously you can't just, not have a supply of energy to your brain or any of your cells because they'll die, right? Glucose is the backup energy for the majority of your cells and organs. Ketones are the primary source. And more importantly, even more importantly than that, and that's very important, ketones cross the blood-brain barrier freely. They don't need insulin, so you don't get insulin resistance, and that can curtail development and function of the brain. Alzheimer's is now being called type 3 diabetes because of the amount of insulin resistance in the brain that Alzheimer's patients have. But ketones also cross the blood-brain barrier and reconstitute into fatty acids, which are actually used as the physical structures of the brain. And so children in particular have to be in ketosis because that's how they get proper brain development and growth. So children in the womb are in ketosis. Children breastfeeding, even though there's lactose in mother's milk, are in ketosis. It's much easier for children to get into ketosis because it's so much more important for them to be in ketosis. And then we put them on sugary formulas, and now it's more difficult for them to get into ketosis, and their brain doesn't develop as properly. Or as soon as they're weaned off, they're not weaned onto fatty meat, which is what their brain and their body needs, but onto sugary mushed vegetables and that sort of garbage. And because of the sugar content, to make it palatable, because it tastes disgusting, then they're going to be kicked out of ketosis. They're going to give you a lot of bread and snacks and crackers and fish crackers and cookies and all these sorts of things. And they're not going to be able to get into proper ketosis, and their brain won't develop properly. So I think that's it. So even as an adolescent or a teenager or an adult, but particularly for children, I think it's very important to try for a ketogenic approach to your kids. And that's that's how we've all lived. If you're worried about that, look at the Inuit, look at the other peoples that have lived like this since time immemorial. I mean, think about it. People have been. We have hard evidence that our ancestors were living in the Arctic Circle during the ice ages, right? So what else was there to eat besides fatty meat? I mean, there's literally nothing. Nothing can grow. What were people eating when they crossed the land bridge from Asia to North America in the Arctic Circle during the last ice age? There isn't going to be anything to eat except the animals, the marine animals, and things like that that are available. It's just ice. You know, during that time, what is now Seattle was under a mile-high block of ice. And we're talking 1,500 miles north of that. Okay, so what was growing? You know, nothing, no plants anyway. So, you know, obviously, you know, we made it across, and people were living like that generationally for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years in some instances, and we were thriving. I mean, you can't even survive an ice age in the Arctic Circle unless you are absolutely killing it. I mean, you can't just eke your way through those conditions. It's way too harsh. And so if you're not thriving, you're going extinct. And we not only thrived, we became the most dominant species in the history of the world during the ice ages, and thought to be because of the ice ages, because we were forced to start becoming apex predators. So that's what I would do. You know, in that order, I would cut those things out. And things like nightshades, obviously, those things you want to avoid. Things like high oxalates, other sorts of things. And if you are going to include low carbohydrate vegetables and fruit, make sure the fruits are ripe, seasonal, local, those sorts of things. It makes a difference because fruit do have toxins. You look at grapes, you look at avocados, we eat these all the time, but they'll kill cats and dogs. So they have toxins in them, right? It's just that we are better able to contend with those toxins than cats and dogs. But there are toxins in there. And so low grade exposure to toxins, even toxins that we're able to deal with, build up over time. And when fruit are picked green, which the vast majority are, unless you go to a farmer's market in your local area, they have far more toxins because the seed isn't ready. So the plant doesn't want anything touching that fruit. And so it's not until the fruit's ripe that they start pulling out those toxins. But if you pick them early, now it's an enclosed system. There's nowhere for the poison to go. It doesn't just break down and go away. That would be nice, but that doesn't happen. The plant has to pull the toxins out of it. So it has to ripen on the plant for it to be less toxic. Not toxic, but less toxic. And so if you pick it green, you'll always get these things picked green. If you're going to the grocery store, then they'll have much more toxins in them. And, saying that, well, we need 5 pieces of fruit a day. Okay. So people in Northern Norway need 5 pieces of fruit a day. That makes sense. Okay. So before we could ship these things or fly these things in from Costa Rica year round, what were they doing? I guess everyone was just dying of, strawberry, deficiencies. I mean, what the hell kind of sense does that make? So think about that as well. And if you are eating different, low carbohydrate sort of vegetables and things like that, mix them up. Mix them up a lot. And because all these plants have toxins, but they have different families of plants will have different types of toxins. So you mix them up, and so you don't eat the same thing every day. So you don't let those toxins build up in their little body and cause more harm than you want.
Wow, what a great answer. It makes me glad I gave up all my California avocados when I went carnivore. So we have just a quick super chat here. So thank you so much, saying Dr. C rocking the Safari Cast bot today. Yes, he is. And we're so glad he's here with us. But I have another question here from Nia. So Nia is asking, what do you say? And I've totally heard this idea too, and I can't wait to hear your answer. But what do you say to the idea that women need to have carbs from time to time, or essentially may need to eat differently from men? I've heard this like around our cycle and stuff like that. We're supposed to have some carbs or something.
Yeah. I mean, you have to sort of, if we're talking about, living naturally and living to our biological design and how people would have lived just in nature, how would that have worked? How would the carb cycling have worked during that time? with the Inuit in the North Pole, is it just like, 2 months, 2 weeks out of the month, they just go like, ooh, I need some chocolate or something like that. It's just like, well, where are they going to get it from? So if it was necessary, then we probably wouldn't be here. There's people crossing the land bridge from Asia to North America. Where were the carbs they were getting for a week before their period, every single month? If that was necessary for proper hormonal development, that were necessary for proper fertility, then we wouldn't be here, right? And we have to sort of think about this. Why would that apply to us if it doesn't apply to any other animal species on Earth? Food is species specific. So the certain species of animal, they eat what that animal eats because they have as a species, we have specific nutritional requirements and certain defenses or vulnerabilities to certain toxins and plants and fungus and things like that. So, a lioness is going to eat the same thing as a male lion. A female badger is going to eat the same thing as a male badger. A female dolphin are going to eat the same thing as a male dolphin. In fact, in the animal kingdom, the males and females, if they're hunting in packs or as groups, they're all hunting the same thing. They're going for the same thing. They're sharing the same kill. When they're individuals, like a female jaguar, still eating the same thing as a male jaguar. And these big herds of herbivores and things like that, they're all eating the same things. They don't have to cycle based on estrus or anything like that. So if it were the case that we needed carbs just for our females of the species, only for our cycle, we would be unique in the animal kingdom. And if we did need that, we would have to explain how that happened naturally. Right? Because before we had the intelligence to have some sort of health coach that said, ooh, you need to do this, it would have just had to happen naturally. And if it couldn't have happened naturally, then it probably didn't happen. And if we were living in the Arctic Circle during an ice age, when there are no carbs available and there's really no Haagen-Dazs, then, where is this coming from? Where are the carbohydrates coming from? You make carbohydrates. You make all the carbohydrates you need for every single situation that you're in. You will not find a normal, healthy, non-diabetic individual who's not taking a bunch of medications on a natural carnivore diet who has abnormal blood sugar. So women before, during, and after their period, their blood sugar is going to be here. And so there are carbs available. Your body makes them. And so maybe your body needs more carbohydrates during that time. You'll make them. It's not like you're not going to drop hypoglycemic or anything like that. Your body will meet the demand that it has. So you make carbohydrates. Whether or not, your hormones, need more or less or this or that or whatever, your body will provide for you. If you start eating carbohydrates, and you actually stop your body from being able to make carbohydrates and now make ketones as well. And so you actually pull yourself back. So it might be a little counterintuitive, but if you eat carbohydrates, now you're limited. Now you've limited your carbohydrates. You think about it like this. You have about 2,300 calories available in glycogen storage if you're carb loading and everything like that in your liver and in your muscles. So it's sort of a store of glucose. If you have a top elite level athlete, 65 kilo person with only 6% body fat, so like an elite level person, that 6% body fat has over 35,000 kilocalories of energy as opposed to the 2,300 calories that they can store in their glycogen. So it's over 15 times the amount of energy in a 6% body fat person, right? And so when you have access to your fat stores, when you're in a ketogenic state, nutritional ketosis, you have unlimited access to all that energy, and you're constantly converting that into glucose and glycogen. So maybe you do need more carbohydrates. Good news, you have an unlimited supply because your body makes it. We had studies, this happens in other animals as well. We actually studied this in wolves. I found a study from 1981 looking at wild wolves. And people at the time was like, well, you have to have carbs you have to eat carbs to burn carbs and all this sort of nonsense. So they said, well, Wolves don't carb load before they chase caribou for 10 hours. Like what do they have? Do they have blood sugar? Do they have glycogen? And they found out, yes, they do. And it's rock solid. It doesn't change. It doesn't vary. It's just here the whole time. It doesn't matter what they're doing, at rest, at play, in the middle of a chase, at the end, after a kill, after they eat. It's here. It's always here. And that's because their body's constantly replenishing their glycogen as well. They've even done studies in athletes and human athletes doing long, big, massive 100-mile ultra marathon for elite level athletes. And these people have been properly keto adapted, because it does take a bit of time. And but at least 9 months, on average 20 months, they were keto adapted. And they found that they did muscle biopsies. So they did a muscle biopsy before big blowout exercise, running on the treadmill for hours. They do a muscle biopsy. These poor guys are talking about somebody's like every step they took for hours felt like someone was stabbing him in the leg with a pen. So it was like, these guys are troopers for doing this. They did a muscle biopsy before the exercise, directly after the exercise, and then 3 hours after the exercise. And they compared it with a carbohydrate group that are sucking down, sugary gels and all these sorts of things to replenish. Muscle glycogen was exactly the same at all three instances. And so people were naturally, automatically replenishing their glycogen. They didn't need to take all these sugary gels or anything like that. Their body popped up their glycogen automatically. So, whether or not you have more of a demand for carbohydrates at any point in your life, you never will have a demand for exogenous carbohydrates in your diet. Your body makes them. As long as you're in nutritional ketosis, your body will make all the carbohydrates you need.
Okay, this next one I can really relate to as a busy mom who cooks and then sometimes is chasing a kid and changing butts and forgets about the food.
Mm-hmm.
So this person asks, they like their meat crispy. Is burnt meat carcinogenic?
Oh, for a given value of carcinogenic, right? So the thing is that, the studies that looked at this, they looked at it in animal models, looking at it with mice that have never cooked their food. We've been cooking food for over 1.5 million years over an open fire. So it's like, whatever happens when you cook meat, even if it gets a bit burned, it's something that we've been exposed to for well over 1 million years. We've only been exposed to lettuce for a few thousand years. So do the math, what's going to be worse for you. And, the agricultural revolution was 10,000 years ago, right? So, but we were cooking meat 1.5, 1.6 million years ago that we have direct evidence of, possibly even longer than that. So whatever happens, we've probably been adapting to it the whole time. Not to say that you should just, burn the hell out of your food, but it should still taste good. But doing these things with animal models isn't always translatable to humans, because they don't eat the same thing. Like if you do a nutrition study on a rabbit, which is what they did like for the early sort of heart disease sorts of things, you're feeding them all this stuff that they've never eaten before, and then you see this changes. Ooh, does that mean that it's going to happen to humans, or would that same thing happen to a lion? Oh, look, we fed a bunch of meat to a rabbit and it got sick. That must mean that lions shouldn't eat meat. I'm like, no, that doesn't mean that at all. So the same thing goes with the animal studies. You have to think about, is this translatable to humans? It isn't always. Even if you think it would be, sometimes it isn't. And that's why you need human trials as well. Animal models are very good, and they can be very helpful, but you have to sort of take them for what they are. So they did these things in animal models, giving mice or rats the burnt meat and things like that, or burnt food, and which they aren't used to. They haven't been cooking anything ever in their existence. But they also gave them in thousands and thousands and thousands of times the concentration that you'd ever get in like a burnt meal. So, in that sense, like if you want to look at it from that, they have found that there's an increased rate of cancer in mice that are designed to get cancer. So these knockout mice that are just like, you look at them funny and they get cancer. And you give them 20 to 30,000 times the amount of the burnt sort of products that you would ever find in like a very burnt piece of meat. And they're not ever designed to eat, they haven't ever been eating cooked meat. They had an increased rate of cancer in those conditions, but that's never been shown in humans. And so that I wouldn't worry too much about that. There have been associations drawn, things like in Japan, they have an increased rate of stomach cancers, and people have said, well, that's because they eat a lot of smoked meats, and but that's just a guess. There isn't actually any direct evidence of that. It's just someone said, oh, I bet you that's what it is. Okay, well, look, fair enough. That's a hypothesis, but you have to test that hypothesis. You can't just throw that out there. Unfortunately, medicine is a lot of that. About 60%, I swear to God, I would guess about 60% of medicine is just somebody's best guess. And it just stuck to like fiber. You should eat fiber. It helps protect against bowel cancer. Okay, well, what study experiment did that come from? Did it come from animal study? Was it a human study? It wasn't any study. There was no study. There is no study. It came from Dr. Burkitt, who was a very famous surgeon, and came named Burkitt's lymphoma is named after him. This is something he just guessed when he was in Africa, and he saw these people that were eating sort of whatever mixed diet, but a lot of fibrous stuff, and they had like large bowel motions, and he noticed that they had low rates of bowel cancer, and they had big bowel motions, and he figured it's because of the fiber, and he just said, must be because of the fiber. What? I mean, you're not even going to check? So he just said that. There was a guess. He was a very famous doctor, and so that guess just people said, oh, Dr. Burkitt thinks it's this. Great. And they just ran with that. Sometimes when you have a best guess and you don't have any competing theory, it wins by default, and so it's just like if you have, you go to the Olympics and there's no one in the final heat of the sprints, you can just walk across the line and you win, and so that's sort of what happened. And then we forget that that's the origin of it. We forget that there's absolutely no evidence to support this. And I've heard people try to defend that. I've heard vegans try to defend that. And to do that, they talk about how brilliant Dr. Burkitt was, this appeal to authority of how wonderful he was and how great he was. And that's what he thought. So who are we to say this? And who's that? That Dr. Anthony, he's not as smart as Dr. Burkitt. And I'm like, well, I can at least run a fucking study, and see if something's right or not, so, but that's it. You sort of get these best guesses. And, so, that's the thing. And so, you have these, these ideas that these, heterocyclic amines, all these sorts of things, they're carcinogenic, but that's where the origin is from. And so it's not very hard evidence. It could very well be true, but we can't really quantify that. We can't really say how much is good or bad for humans. It was 25,000 times the amount that you'd get in a burnt steak were given to these mice, and that's what had this increased level of cancer. So 25,000 burnt steaks at one time, maybe, but that's if you can translate the animal models to human models. Otherwise, I don't worry about it. Just don't burn your meat. It's real easy. So like people say this, well, what about burnt meat? It can be carcinogenic. Don't burn it. Just be a better cook. It's like, it's not that hard, and, and whatever's been happening, like I said, we've been cooking meat over a fire for over 1 million years. I don't worry about it too much, but if it tastes bad, it tastes too burnt, don't eat it. Just go by your taste preferences.
That's so brilliant. And I feel like a lot of things with the carnivore diet is just common sense. Like if it's burnt, don't eat it. And I found that, like, for me, I say fiber is a myth because I used to suffer from chronic constipation. I'd only go like once or twice a month. And now on a carnivore diet, I'm going several times a week, no straining. And so I just wanted to put that out there. If anyone has they're thinking about constipation, don't worry about that. Fiber's not going to help you. But I do want to honor these super chats that people have sent you. So one is a comment, which is awesome. And the second one is a question. So I'll do the comment first. Just wanted to say thank you to Dr. C for sharing his knowledge. 6 months on carnivore, A1C was 12.4, now 5.6, 100% reversed. Like,
Yay,
that is
amazing.
just incredible.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was. Especially now that, you know, they're trying to, I mean, you know, we're actually getting some traction when just everybody and their mother is coming out with, it's like, oh, the study shows that meat causes diabetes, meat causes all these sorts of things. It's like you have this epidemiological sort of bullshit, you know, put out by a vegan activist and, you know, people like Dr. Gardner or Walter Willett from, you know, Stanford and Harvard, respectively. They've been vegan activists for decades, and they're coming. Oh, look at this meat. Well, I know what you think, buddy, but do you actually think it, or are you just trying to push your ideology on people? Especially when we have controlled trials in humans showing that you put people on a high-fat, meat-based ketogenic diet, it reverses diabetes. So in clinical trials in humans, not animal models, in humans, we are reversing diabetes, and we're seeing this clinically as well. Professor Steve Finney from UC Davis, who's not no slouch. You know, he's an MD PhD from MIT and Stanford, and he's been a professor of medicine and biology for decades, and he's been studying ketogenic diets in humans for decades. And he showed this. They did a clinical trial showing you could reverse type 2 diabetes and make type 1 diabetes extremely much more easily controlled and need much less insulin, which is a big hit to certain people who make a lot of money selling insulin. And then his company Virta Health has now reversed over 25,000 diabetics in practice, right? So we have hard evidence that eating meat actually is part of a treatment plan to reverse diabetes. You know, you're getting rid of all the things that cause diabetes. And we know meat doesn't cause diabetes because you put people only eating meat and their diabetes goes away, just like with Jesse. And so now they're saying, oh, look at this. Scientists say that, you know, meat causes diabetes. Like, oh, that's cute. But people buy this stuff. It's crazy. But then you see this, you know, just, and that's another thing too. What they'll say is like, well, it doesn't matter what your HbA1c is. It doesn't matter that your HbA1c went from 12 down to 5. The only thing that matters is insulin resistance. Well, your fasting insulin is 2. So what's the point? No, it's only as by your glucose tolerance test. And it's just like, really? Is that what you learned in medical school, buddy? No, sorry, that's not actually how that works. So if anybody runs against this stupid argument, when you have people that are on a ketogenic diet and they're not taking in a whole bunch of carbohydrates, you don't need as much insulin. When you are an alcoholic and you're drinking alcohol all the time, there are certain things that your liver and your body does to fend against the constant onslaught of alcohol that's coming into your body, and it preloads these enzymes to say like, okay, we need to catch this. We need to be ready for it. And then you stop drinking for 6 months and all of a sudden your body goes, oh, thank God. And it doesn't need to pre-make these things. And all of a sudden you drink again and it hits you in the face because, you know, you weren't ready for it. Same thing goes with carbohydrates and insulin. When you're eating a lot of carbohydrates, it is toxic for your body. You want your blood sugar has to be at a very certain level. If it goes above that level, even 1 gram, your body has about 4 grams of glucose throughout your entire circulatory system. And we're thinking we need to eat hundreds a day. Your body wants to keep that under 4. And even 1 extra gram, that's what kills diabetics. Glucose above that level is toxic to the human body and to anybody. And you get these advanced glycation end products. This is what makes diabetics' toes rot off, make it so their feet have to get amputated, then their legs and their kidneys fail. They go on dialysis, then they need a transplant. They get heart disease, they get Alzheimer's, they get diabetic retinopathy, they go blind, and then they just die. And that's from 1 extra gram of glucose. And so dumping in 400 grams a day, probably not a great idea. So your body needs to preload with insulin if you have this constant onslaught of carbohydrates. When you stop doing that, then you don't need that anymore. And so you don't pre-make insulin. And so that's what happens in this oral glucose tolerance test. They say, oh, look, blood sugar goes up. That means you're diabetic. No, that means you don't understand biology because you're not pre-making the insulin. And so it goes up, but you check it a couple hours later, way down. Why is that? Because the insulin is now up. You do something called a Kraft test, K-R-A-F-T, where you check the glucose and the insulin at the same time. You say, oh, look, the glucose is up. but insulin's still down here at like basically nothing. But then you check it 5 hours later, insulin's up, glucose is down, right? But you do that for a couple of days, you start pre-making the insulin, you actually find these people are more insulin sensitive than the normal population. So they say, oh, it's insulin resistance and all that sort of stuff. No, they're not insulin resistance. It's just that you have to understand physiology better than a second grader. And so that's amazing. So dropping from HbA1c from nearly 13 down to, into the 5s, that's amazing. And so anybody who tells you, no, you're still diabetic, it's actually worse now, they're just gaslighting, it's just completely ridiculous. So that's an amazing job. No one has ever done that. When my mom dropped her HbA1c down from 8.9 down to 6.1 in 2 months and came off all her medications, her doctor was floored by this. And she actually had a good doctor. She was a great doctor. I'm very, very sad that she retired recently because she was great. Dr. Morrison, shout out to Dr. Morrison in Seattle. She just looked at my mom and said, this doesn't happen. Diabetes is a progressive illness that only gets worse. We can sort of mitigate it and slow it down with diet, lifestyle, and medications, but it only gets worse. How the hell did you do this? What the hell did you do? And, my mom had gone carnivore. And so she told her about, my thoughts about how, humans should eat and all the research I was doing. And she was very interested. I went in there and we spoke for like an hour and a half. It was like supposed to be my mom's 20-minute appointment. We ended up speaking for like an hour and a half, like her and her PA. They were, we were just in this very involved conversation. She's a very bright lady. She's an MD PhD from Harvard, and she has a PhD in biochemistry from Harvard. And I started talking about like, hey, look, we're looking at biochemistry all wrong. Being in what's so-called fed state is not our primary state. This so-called fasting state. I think that's our primary metabolic state. That's the primary metabolic state of most animals in nature. And that's where all of our heavy machinery come to bear. And we started talking about it. She's like, this all makes sense. And she just changed everything around and started getting these results, so, don't listen to the idiots and the gaslighters out there. You're doing great. And I'm thank you for sharing. And I'm really happy for you.
Okay, so we have a super chat that has a question attached. So I'm going to pop it up here. It says, hi, doctor, 30 days in, I have a recent problem. No appetite at all. I love steak, but after not eating for a day, I feel like vomiting from the first bite. Cry emoji. Thanks.
Yeah, look, your body just may not need it. I thought that was a very weird phenomenon. This is why I've sort of argued that you go by taste. That's your body telling you when you're hungry or not. If it tastes good and you enjoy it, your body is welcoming those nutrients. And if you're eating the right thing, obviously there's some things that are chemically designed to hit that that high palatability sort of mechanisms in our brain. But just eating fatty meat is you should be able to listen to this. And I noticed that too. When I had excess body fat to lose, and I was training like crazy. I was lifting weights for 3-4 hours a day. I was training in rugby, 2-3 hours a day, and I hadn't eaten all day. And I was coming back from rugby, going like, oh, all right, I'm going to have a big steak because, I've just worked out for like 7 hours. I'm going to work out, tomorrow I'm going to work out for another 6-7 hours. So obviously I need the energy to do that because that's what you thought. You eat today for your energy tomorrow. And that's only the case if you're eating carbs. When you're fat adapted and you're running on your fat stores, the energy you use tomorrow is not what you eat today. It's what you ate 2 weeks ago. And so everything in my body was telling me, don't do it. Don't eat a steak. That's a horrible idea. And I was like, I had these weird internal dialogues with myself. Like, what the hell is that? I love steak. It's my favorite thing in the world. Like, why would I not want to eat that? Everything was like, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And I was like, that's just so weird. I don't know what the hell's going on. I wasn't going to eat anything else. But I decided, like, okay, well, I'll take some time. I'll do a reverse sear, just spend 2 hours making just amazing steak, watch a movie, waited a couple hours. And at that point, the steak was ready. I'm like, yeah, I guess I could kind of eat something. Got like a quarter of the way through it. And I was like, I am just not enjoying this. I was getting nauseated. I was just like, ugh, my body was rebelling against me. I'm like, and it was very, there's very trepidatious, but I was just like, okay, I'm going to put it in the fridge and come back to it tomorrow. And I was very nervous about that. Next day I felt great, had great energy, worked out fine. And now the steak's in the fridge, cold, it's dry, the fat's hard, tasted delicious. And that's because my body wanted the nutrients then, right? So just listen to your body. If your body's telling you not to eat a day, it's not the end of the world. The Mongols would go 5 days without eating. They'd ravage the countryside and then eat 10 pounds of horse meat in a day, right? You'll be fine. Lions and lionesses sometimes eat once a week, right? But they eat a lot during that time. So just listen to your body. We're more than capable of skipping a meal. We're more than capable of skipping many meals. It's not that that's something you have to do if you have food available and your body's telling you to eat, but we're more than capable of it. If a species of animal can't survive a famine, it's dead, so we're descended from the survivors. So if your body, especially if your body's telling you not to eat, that's not fasting. That's just, not overeating. So that's fine. So your body's just telling you not to eat, and that's fine. So try to eat once a day, but stop eating as soon as fatty meat stops tasting good. And if that's bite one, it's bite one. That's fine. But give it a try. You have to relearn your hunger signals. Most people won't have the same feeling of appetite and hunger that they normally did. My dad sort of, when they sort of started this, my mom and dad started this. My mom asked him once, said, hey, would you like me to make you a steak? Are you hungry? Would you like me to make you a steak? He just looked at my mom. He's just like, I haven't been hungry in 6 months, so I don't know how to answer that, And that's the thing. You have to relearn your hunger signals, and it goes by taste. And so if you feel off, you feel weird, you feel low energy, something like that, say, okay, or you're getting carb cravings, just say, okay, am I hungry? Try eating some fatty meat or eggs. If they taste good, yes, that was hunger. You're hungry. Keep eating until fatty meat stops tasting good. And if you go, okay, well, I'll try and eat, and you have a bite, and you're like, nope, not doing it. It's not hunger, right? So just leave it alone. It's okay. If you don't eat every day because your body's telling you not to, that's totally fine. Come back to it the next day or the day after that. It will taste good again, I promise.
Okay. Susan wants to know if seltzer water is okay. I remember hearing a rumor like 20 years ago that the carbon suffocated your white blood cells, but now all of a sudden carnivores are drinking this like it's totally fine. Is it okay?
It's a good question. It's one that some people will say no, it isn't. I haven't looked into all the arguments for that, so I don't know. Short answer is I don't know for sure. There are people that argue that it's not and that you shouldn't do it. I hadn't heard about the white blood cell thing. It's something I'm just gonna have to actually look into better. But there are chemicals you're putting in there. You're putting in some sort of carboxylic acid or these sorts of things to get the carbonation in the bubbles and these sorts of things. What is that doing in your body? Probably something. If you're gonna have like a little bit of it for a treat every now and then, it's probably fine. I probably wouldn't just be drinking gallons of this stuff. I do have friends that do carnivore and they just won't drink anything except sparkling water. And so, we're actually in Wyoming, and a friend of mine was there with her husband, and she's just like, I can't find water anywhere. Like, I'm just thirsty. I haven't had water in a day. And I was just like, is there not water? I haven't really had a problem doing that. And it was just like, no, no one has sparkling water. I'm like, all right, so that's first world problems. But it's but that that's some people's preference. So for me, I don't know fully. It's something I'll have to look into in more depth. But for me personally, I certainly don't make it the majority of what I drink. If there's something in there that's not great for you, like anything else, you just want to keep that to a minimum. And so a little bit of sparkling water every now and then, probably not going to kill you. But the vast majority of what you drink just be normal, filtered water, or if you have some good supply, something that doesn't have a bunch of chlorine and fluoride and all these other sorts of things, and it's like, all those weird sort of things in there. You want some sort of filter that gets those out and, just, keep you as healthy as you can. I mean, fluoridation and things like that, increased fluoridation, has been directly linked to lower IQs in both adults and children. And so, I don't think this is a very good idea to consume that, especially for kids. It causes calcification of the pineal gland, which is where you get a lot of very important hormones such as melatonin, DMT, which comes out, which is what makes you dream. That gets frozen and damaged, and it can really screw up your sleep. The pineal gland used to be called like the window to the next world, things like that. Maybe because of that dreaming capability, but damages it. And you can see this on X-ray in older adults. They have this piece of like this little, raisin-sized piece of calcium just in the middle of their brain. That's the pineal gland that's been calcified. So like clearly that's not normal. That's from fluoride. And so, just avoid that garbage.
I was muted. Sorry. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And I recently just got my own little, like old school, like seltzer maker or water maker. And now I'm like kind of thinking about it twice. So thank you for answering that. Dr. Nelson is a big fan of the show. We love his questions and his participation in the chat always. So his question is, please talk about high fat versus high protein for men versus men, or women versus men, or lions versus lionesses, how we like to say here.
Yeah. Well, first of all, hi to Dr. Nelson. I've had him on the podcast. He's a great guy, and good to see him. Good to see you here. High fat versus high protein. So, same thing. So, each individual is probably going to have, a slightly different metabolic demands for men and women as well, not to mention between men and women. You just need the right amount of fat. You need enough fat. You need enough protein for your individual demands. Everyone's coming from a different place. They have a different amount of exercise. We're gaining weight, we're losing weight, we're, in the gym, we're not in the gym, we're satiated, we're breastfeeding, we're pregnant. Everyone's going to have very, very, very different set of demands. So you just need to make sure you're getting enough protein and you're getting enough fat. It's all perspective, right? So depending on how you look at it, is it high fat? Is it high this or whatever? Well, it's a hell of a lot more fat and protein than what anybody else is eating. So from that regard, from the perspective of what everybody else is eating, it's both high fat and high protein. For us, it's just the right amount of fat, the right amount of protein. Typically, that means about 1 gram of fat to 2 grams of fat to every 1 gram of protein. So 1 to 2 grams of fat to 1 gram of protein is the right amount of fat and protein, as opposed to high or low or whatever. But that could change. It could be that someone needs, more protein than that. So maybe, slightly less than 1 gram of fat to 1 gram of protein, things like that, or not. But you just aim for that. You aim for that 1 to 2 grams of fat to 1 gram of protein. You eat until your body is telling you that's enough. And you can tell how much your body is absorbing from fat. We're talking about constipation. Your body has a limited capacity to absorb fat. I don't think that's a mistake. I don't think your body's making a random amount of bile to absorb a random amount of fat. Your body doesn't do anything randomly anywhere else in your entire body. So why would we be doing that randomly? Bile is a very expensive, high cost substance, and so we wouldn't just make that for no reason. So I think we're making bile because we want a reciprocal amount of fat to be absorbed, because you really can't absorb fat without bile, except for MCTs, medium chain triglycerides. You can absorb those without bile, but the vast majority of fats will just go out. So you eat fat, and then you eat to the point that you just don't have bile anymore. That's the right amount of fat. And a little bit over that, then that keeps your stool soft. That little bit extra fat goes in your stools. That keeps your stool soft. You get a lot more than that. It's just a spillover valve. So you're going to get, loose stools, but that's not an infection. That's not harmful. It's just more fat than your body needs. So that's how you can tell. If you're constipated, getting dry, hard, difficult to pass stools, that's what constipation is. It's not infrequency. It's the consistency of the stool. And if you're getting dry, hard, actual constipation, as per the Bristol stool chart, that is by definition means you're not eating enough fat. And so you just get more fat. If you're eating a lot more protein than fat, a lot more protein than fat, and you're getting the majority of your calories from protein than fat, which is difficult to do because fat is when you're using protein for energy, usually you only get about 3.4 kilocalories per gram, whereas fat, you get about 9 kilocalories per gram. So you're getting, 3 times the energy. So it's difficult to get more calories from protein than fat. But if you do, and you do that consistently for a long time, it actually can cause problems. There's something called protein poisoning, and that can actually give you loose stools as well. You can get watery diarrhea and stomach upset and other sorts of problems. And that can actually be an issue. So it is a very high fat diet. It is as much or more fat than protein. Certainly by calories, you're looking at around 70 to 80% calories from fat typically. And that can change for the individual, but you want to aim for that and adjust to your personal needs from there.
Okay, thank you so much for that answer. Wow, you're always so thorough. Like, I just learned so much every time you answer something. I really appreciate it. My next question here is, it kind of hits home because I'm currently getting off the coffee. So I've been drinking coffee since college because one of my college jobs was working in a coffee shop. Dang it. And then I started drinking the coffee, and I've been drinking it since, and I am now totally off the caffeinated stuff. And I'm working on weaning myself off the decaf. So it's pretty awesome. But so carnivore teacher, this is John, and he is asking, a lot of carnivores are still drinking coffee. Please explain the benefits to stopping coffee.
Well, one of the benefits is you stop getting diarrhea, because the coffee is a laxative. And so one of the first things that happen when people go on carnivore, they don't stop coffee, and they're just having, a big, trouble, in the bathroom with that. And it's like, oh, carnivore causes, all this, Joe Rogan called it disaster pants. And it's like, well, that's often because people are still drinking coffee. And, I'm drinking the same amount of coffee I was before, but you're eating very differently. And, when you're eating fiber and other sorts of things that actually slow down your digestion, fiber does not speed up your digestion. It slows it down. It gives physical bulk and blocks things up. And a little bit mild laxative effect from the coffee is probably helpful. But now when you get rid of that blockage, and it's just free range. It's like, when a door's stuck, you need to really push at it. But now it's open, you just fall on your face. And that's what the coffee is doing when you pull the fiber out of it. And so you can get bad diarrhea. But, you think about it this way, what is the reason we're not eating plants? Because they have toxins, they have anti-nutrients, they block the absorption of different nutrients, and make the food that you're eating less nutritious. That's what coffee does. So the same reason that I don't eat lettuce, I don't eat coffee either. And a coffee bean is a seed. A seed is a plant's baby. Everything protects its babies more than anything. And so in the seeds, the beans, legumes, the nuts, all these sorts of things, the grains, this is where you'll generally find the highest concentration of plant defense chemicals. And coffee is no exception. In fact, it's a very good example of this. And, tons of lectins, tons of phytates, tons of tannins, tons of caffeine. Caffeine is a neurotoxin and an insecticide that was designed to fry the brains of insects trying to eat that seed. And so, there are a lot of especially anti-nutrients in coffee. So when people have coffee with a meal, they are not going to absorb nearly as much of those nutrients. They have studies with oysters, looking at zinc, tons of zinc in oysters, and you eat, a certain amount of oysters, you get this big slingshot of zinc in your blood. You can test it right after you absorb all this stuff. They gave it with black beans. They only absorbed a quarter of the zinc, only had a quarter of the rise in the zinc with the same amount of oysters. And then they gave it with corn tortillas. How basic is a corn tortilla? No rise in the zinc at all, completely blocked out all absorption of the zinc. Coffee will do that and then some. And so I even have patients who, I'm tracking their bloods, they're on different medications, and we have signs that they're not absorbing it. So like thyroid medication, for instance, they were hypothyroid, their thyroid levels were too low. They were put on thyroid medication, and all of a sudden they came in, their thyroid was way too low. And I was like, okay, did you stop taking your medication? Like, what changed? And I said, no, I'm taking it every day. It turns out that they were taking it with coffee. And I said, okay, cut out the coffee when you're taking this. Wait at least 2 hours after you take the pill, and then take it. tested them again in 3 weeks, and they had doubled their thyroid levels, right? Same medications, right? So people have, most people are a bit deficient in zinc and magnesium. Because, in certain areas, the soil might be deficient in zinc and magnesium, but also because a lot of people drink coffee, and coffee will block the absorption of zinc and magnesium and actually can get in your body and strip out the zinc and magnesium. Caffeine itself will get into your bloodstream and strip out and chelate magnesium. And so it's just well known that, it's actually taught in medical school. I was taught that in medical school. So, I guess you could call that some nutritional education, but there's the same problem. The same reasons that you stopped eating the other plants is the reason you should stop drinking coffee. If someone wants to wean off, I sometimes tell them to go the other way. They want that hit. Some people just like the experience. They just enjoy the coffee and the ritual and the horrible taste, and they just decide that that's what they want to do, and so they just go for the decaffeinated approach. But you think about it, there are 150,000 chemicals in coffee besides the caffeine, right? And they have a lot of they can cause a lot of problems in your body. The caffeine's bad enough, but there's a lot of other things as well. So sometimes if people need it for that energy pickup, first of all, once you get off of it, you find that your energy is much more consistent throughout the day. But sometimes I'll tell them, why don't you just go on like a no dose, like 50 milligrams, 100 milligrams of just a caffeine pill, and you just isolated the caffeine that you want, gotten rid of the 150,000 other things, and then you can just get that energy, and you've cut out all these other sorts of inflammatory factors and anti-nutrients. People tend to feel a lot better too, and then after a week or so, they're like, hey, maybe I don't even need these pills anymore, and they can come off that way too. So yeah, those are some of the reasons.
Dr. Chaffee, I don't like that answer.
No. Yeah. Yeah,
I hope you don't mind. Can we ask one last question?
Yeah, of course.
I have a friend who is brand new to carnivore, and she came on in hopes of reducing her anxiety, but she said it actually went up. Is that possible, or what could that be from?
Well, it could certainly, yes, absolutely. Anything's possible. Everyone's going to sort of react sort of slightly differently. The benefits of anxiety when going carnivore is you're eliminating a lot of things that can cause anxiety. And sometimes this is a long-term process as well. And when the body's changing and the neurochemistry is changing too, it can get a bit disrupted. Long term, it should help. You're getting rid of carbohydrates and sugars, all these sorts of things that can cause inflammation in the brain, that can damage the mitochondria. Mitochondria are very, very important for brain health and neuronal health. And when people are on ketogenic diets, like a carnivore diet is a ketogenic diet, after 3-4 months, people tend to have 4 times the number of mitochondria, and they're 4 times as effective because they're recycling, turning over, and multiplying the mitochondria they have, and that makes their brain work better. That makes their neurons and every cell in their body work better. And so it can take a while, but it does happen. The benefit of doing carnivore versus just a standard keto diet, including vegetables, is that a lot of those vegetable plant toxins can be neurotoxic and cause issues in your brain. I see so many people with depression, anxiety, myself included, that getting rid of the greens just made a huge difference. Jordan Peterson famously talks about this. He was doing very heavy keto, just a lot of fatty meat and some salads. And it wasn't until he cut out the salads that his crippling anxiety went away. And it was about 3 weeks. If your anxiety goes up, there could be reasons for that. Again, just the different sort of changes in your body and your brain chemistry. Some people attribute this also to microbiome die-off, that these nasty sort of characters in your microbiome that can affect your serotonin levels and other sort of neurotransmitters going up through the gut brain up into your your cerebral cortex, them dying off can actually cause some problems because they're freaking out, going like, "Oh, you need to give us our food because we don't want to die," and that can be very manipulative. And sometimes these different bacteria can actually send different signals up to your brain and make you crave the things that they want, not necessarily what you want. And so that could be happening too. But again, that's a temporary thing too. And so people can experience, especially in the first few weeks, weird things. And they typically go away. And so hopefully that's the case for you as well. I mean, if you wanted to, you could try having some like fermented dairy, like if you're not autoimmune anyway, just some plain yogurt, put on meat, chewed up together, swallowed, and that can sort of hide the bacteria in that bolus of food and hopefully get those good bacteria down into your colon. If you're just eating it straight, then it's just going to get fried up in your stomach acid. So you need to eat it with meat to try to hide those bacteria. Eventually, your oral biome will change as well. You have different bacteria in your mouth, and those bacteria will get into every single bite of food that you eat and go in your stomach and potentially feed your lower biome. That's sort of a working theory that I have now, because we're seeing people going carnivore without ferments, and they're massively overhauling their microbiome for the better, and even having more new species of bacteria that didn't exist there before they dropped the plants. So it's very interesting. But I would imagine that this is a temporary. Could be just from the disruptions in your brain chemistry. Could very well be from changes in your microbiome and the die-off there. There's other sorts of die-off. I mean, sometimes people get die-off from Candida, causes weird sort of symptoms like this as well. But again, these are all things that are likely temporary, and hopefully you get through. Make sure you're eating enough. Make sure you're eating enough fat. That's extremely important, because that can cause anxiety and problems too. And enough water. And just so do the things that you can do and that you can change and affect. And then just let your body work through whatever process it's going through, and you should come out the other side much better.
Well, Dr. Chaffee, this has just been such a wonderful episode with you. I can't believe it's already been over an hour. We have so many more questions. We hope maybe you'll consider coming back sometime, but you'll forever have the honor of being our first lion on the show. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. No, it was a pleasure. I'd love to come back on sometime. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, from all of us here at Lioness Lifestyle Live, thank you so much for roaring with us tonight. Please join us next week at 8 p.m. Eastern, where we will feature Dr. Jody Nishida as our next guest. Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.